So we appreciate you all coming into Roomrua, and we'll move to our first presentation. Presenter is Associate Professor Byron Rangiwai from Unitec, who will be presenting Flighty like the pīwakawaka, ongoing insights from a national ADHD survey in Aotearoa. Kia ora, Byron. I'll ask you to introduce yourself and share your presentation, please.
Well, kia ora tātou. It's a great pleasure and honour to be here with you all this afternoon. Here at Unitec, we have our staff awards on, and the theme is Tropicana. So today I'm wearing my Hawaiian lei that was given to me in 2015 when I graduated with my a PhD. Okay, so kia ora tātou. My presentation today is entitled Flighty like the pīwakawaka, like the fantail. So today I'm going to be talking about ongoing insights from a national ADHD survey that I'm running. What I want to just say first is that there's no research on ADHD in Māori. My piece is one of the only ones. So we need to do more work. So just a signal to all you researchers out there, this is a very serious piece of, a very serious gap. If you understand anything about neurodiversity and ADHD, you will know that statistics for things like suicide, alcohol and drug abuse, and all the other negative statistics, including things like car accidents and other types of issues, are a part of those who live with ADHD. So, yeah, I'll be talking a little bit about those things as well. And now I can't get this to work. Okay. So I just want to firstly honour the mana whenua of Tāmaki Makaurau. There are many different iwi and hapu that have mana whenua here. And also wish to acknowledge Te Ariki Nui, ngā waihono i te pō tātou te whirowhiro, for her her leadership and for her, Anyway, this is who I am. These are my 4 pepeha from the 4 iwi that I belong to. And I was born in Te Tairawhiti in Gisborne, and I was raised in Murupara and Waiōhau. And I was diagnosed with ADHD in 2023 in May, at very great cost, I might add. And there's reasons for that, because ADHD can't be diagnosed by a doctor normally. You have to go to a psychiatrist to get a diagnosis and receive medication for that. So, yeah, it's a barrier. Probably got a few other things as well. So ADHD, people often think of ADHD as those 2 things at the top of the iceberg, but actually it's all the things on the bottom that people don't see. And furthermore, I also wanted to direct you to this little thing as well, which is sort of showing some of the traits of ADHD at the top, hyperactivity, distractibility, and so forth, but also flipping some of those attributes of ADHD that are sometimes seen as negative. So rather than people being described as troublemakers, they're actually outspoken. Or people that are labelled as intense. If you flip it over, they're actually passionate and creative. So just wanted to signal that there's a need, I think, for, neurodiversity to be seen in a positive light. And I know that more and more we are seeing this occur in learning spaces. In Aotearoa ADHD, there are significant barriers to diagnosis. 90% of parents and 80% of adults face challenges, long waiting times. Not only are there long waiting times, it's also very expensive. So public services offer minimal assessment. Usually you can get a kid assessed when they're a kid. As soon as they become an adult, better get the checkbook out because it's going to cost you. Māori children are less likely to receive treatment despite higher ADHD consistent behaviour. There are a number of reasons this could be. Probably racism in the health system is a top one. Often Māori mothers, sometimes people question how they were in their pregnancy, if you catch my drift. So, talking about things like fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Sometimes health practitioners might make assumptions that a Māori mother has been drinking during their pregnancy, which has resulted in their child acting in a certain way. So we need to get rid of that kind of rubbish as well. Neurodiverse groups are overlooked in health policy. I can tell you that from first-hand experience. I think Aotearoa, actually I'll say New Zealand rather than Aotearoa on this occasion. I think New Zealand is an extremely slow-moving country, slow-moving lawmakers and slow-moving policymakers. And if we were to look at the impacts that neurodiversity has on not only people's lives, but the economic impact runs into the billions and billions in lost productivity. So like most governments, they like to prioritize the things that get the most clicks and the most votes and not the things that actually work. So I would like to challenge our government to be better and do better. I'm running a national ADHD survey. I believe it's the first one that I've seen because I haven't seen much data around. And this particular survey just focuses on demographics, diagnosis, treatment, and personal experiences. The survey is still open at the moment. That we're still gathering. We're nearly at 500, I think, nearly 500 responses so far. But this particular presentation only concentrates on the number we had 2 weeks ago, which was 408. 408 participants across the country, 72 of whom are Māori, 14 Pacific Islander, and they found pretty much the same things that ADHD people experience, so no surprises there. Barriers to diagnosis and treatment, persistent stigma and discrimination, and a need for culturally tailored support. These are some, I'll just stick them up there, some quotes from some of the participants with regard to their Māori identity and their neurodiversity. And I think the one that kind of strikes me the most is the final one there at the bottom. Trying to live Māori in a Pākehā world with ADHD is very confusing. Super confusing, actually. So, that's just a signal to say there's a lot more need. There's a need for much more research in this space, and in particular to find culturally relevant interventions and treatments and supports for those with ADHD. Okay, so these are the three areas that I wanted to talk about mostly, I think, in this presentation because it relates to the Atlands, all the Atlansing things. It relates to supporting students. Okay, so one of the questions in the survey is around how ADHD has impacted their participants' education. And this is across schooling and tertiary. We haven't actually narrowed it down into tertiary only because this is a very broad survey. So some of you might want to pick up the tertiary aspect of this and run with it and do some rangahau as well, some research. I'm just going to move this very annoying Zoom thing so I can read. Here we go. So there's definitely, the participants are saying that there's been a significant impact on their academic performance due to the ADHD and a lack of support. So what they say is that it affects their performance inconsistently, and because ADHD people have an interest-based central nervous system, but their academic performance is based on interest. So, building upon this, one of the ADHD behaviors that are quite helpful in study at times is this thing called hyperfocus. And so the participants said that hyperfocus can drive success for them in subjects of interest. Again, it's only in subjects of interest. So consistent performance is also challenging, they say, and they experience things or like procrastination, missed deadlines, failure, and last minute. And they also talked about how trying to do things at the last minute impacts their mental health. And I'm sure all of us who have done all-nighters to try to do an assessment know that only too well. They also talked about emotions and social dynamics. They talked about emotional struggles They talked about emotional dysregulation and the way in which it leads to unhealthy coping, like drugs, alcohol, and addictions. They also talked about supportive teachers, and in this case, people, not just teachers, but also people who support students in lots of other ways, are critical to their success. Key challenges also include bullying, negative self-worth, anxiety, frustration, and alienation. Furthermore, because a lot of the participants received diagnosis very late in life, for example, I received diagnosis at age 43, this can impact very much on their life, well, like the entire life actually. So they say that like late diagnosis leads to regret and missed potential. They also talked about they believe that early diagnosis can improve outcomes for people with ADHD, and this is actually proven by research which says the same thing. They also said that struggles that they experience in the classroom or in institutions and learning environments are dismissed as laziness. And I, as a teacher, I've been guilty of labeling people in that way as well. So I've learned a lot from my own diagnosis, how better to help people who live with neurodiversity. They also talked about a lack of support, and that a lack of support leads to underachievement and low self-esteem. They also felt misunderstood by teachers, resulting in harsh criticism and punishment. Now, what some people might not know about ADHD is that many people with ADHD, well, actually all of them, suffer from a thing called rejective sensitivity dysphoria, and that's when they perceive criticism or even people's facial expressions or particular words in a way that triggers them sometimes into a depressive downward spiral. So for me as a teacher and a researcher, I've learned how to use better words and how to be more encouraging. So I would encourage us all, and I know you're all encouraging great people anyway, but I would just encourage us to maybe take a little more extra special care with our neurodiverse community, because there's a lot of sensitivity in us, and most of us have experienced between 20 and 30,000 negative confirmations in childhood. So, for example, when I went to school in the 80s and 90s, teachers were still hitting us, and so getting whacked over the hands with or over the knuckles with a 2-meter wooden ruler, 1-meter wooden ruler for getting a times tables wrong when you've got dyscalculia, it's quite traumatic. So, I'm glad we've moved away from those days, but sometimes our words, and I'm guilty of this myself, sometimes our words can even be more harsh than physical punishment. Okay, so I'll just finish. I've got 6 more minutes. So they also, in the research, I also asked them about what accommodations and support they might have received in school or at uni or Polytech, wherever they're studying. They talked about limited support due to late diagnosis. So undiagnosed at school means that they'd never had accommodations at school. I know in my case, we used to get punished for not being able to sit on the mat completely still and fold your arms and legs and all of those sort of ridiculous things. They also felt misunderstood by teachers and labeled as lazy, organized, and unmotivated. Most common support received by the participants was they received more time at times, reader-writer assistance, flexible learning, like reduced course loads, online tools, flexible submission formats, which is all great stuff. But the diagnosis thing is actually a huge barrier, because I remember having a student who believed they had ADHD, and I would say they probably did, but without $2,000 or so to get a diagnosis, they couldn't access support within Unitec because they couldn't get the diagnosis. So don't know who's in charge of fixing that, but let's fix it. Barriers to support. Formal diagnosis is a barrier, obviously. It costs a lot, and there's minimal understanding about ADHD and neurodiversity more broadly. We're getting a lot better. And there's also sometimes they experience stigma from teachers and educators. So positive experiences, which are always good to look at. They found that supportive teachers and educators, mentors, tutors make significant positive impacts to their education, and flexible, neurodiverse, friendly environments provide informal accommodations to them, like having spaces that are quiet, for example. Everybody actually benefits from places that are quiet, not just neurodiverse people. So sometimes, sometimes the accommodations that we allow people to have to get through the educational journey are actually suitable to lots of different people. And I think this is the concept of universal design, actually. But I won't go on any more about that. And they also talked about what it's like to cope without formal support. So there's a concept in neurodiversity called masking. So sometimes people will subconsciously or even consciously mask their behaviors. For example, if a person stims in a certain way where their arms move or their hands move or fidget, they will actually consciously pull their bodies in. As uncomfortable as it is, they will make themselves try to appear normal. And by the time the day's over, they're completely wiped out. So it would be great if we could get to a stage where people could be 100% themselves, regardless of how that looks in this neurotypical world. 3 minutes left. These are early recommendations from the survey. Keeping in mind, this is just from 408. We're reaching nearly 500 at the moment, and my goal is to get to 1,000. But we might not make it. But here are some early recommendations that might help us in our journey of supporting tauira in this space. So recommendations from the research show that the participants would like to see early diagnosis and intervention right at the school level, school-wide screenings for ADHD, training teachers and educators on how to identify diverse ADHD presentations, and to also be able to develop individual learning plans. Recommendation 2 was around flexible learning structures. So, for example, allowing movement breaks and alternative assessments, to adopt kinesthetic and multisensory teaching methods, and of course to personalise learning pathways, because ADHD people have interest-based nervous systems. So it's important to allow them to do assessments that they find interesting. Recommendation 3, cultural and holistic support. So incorporating hauora or incorporating holistic health into education is very helpful, they say. And the participants also talked about the need for whānau and family to be engaged in communities, to be engaged in support plans. Final recommendation was about funding and resources. So the participants talked about needing funding for ADHD specific training and accommodations, and to increase access to educational psychologists and assistive tools. And that kind of links back to this thing about people needing a diagnosis to access support at uni or support at Polytech or wherever. It's impossible to do that if people have to pay $2,000 to get assessed, right? So yeah, we might want to think about how we change that. I'm not going to talk about these. What I will say, though, is that I've developed a model about the pīwakawaka, which relates the pīwakawaka's seemingly frantic behavior with ADHD. If you want to know more, I can send you a paper. I can set up a meeting to talk with you. And I would also love for anybody in the room who is interested in research into neurodiversity to please get in touch, because we need this research to be done for the sake of Māori, for the sake of Aotearoa. And I think I might have mentioned there's really nothing about Māori and neurodiversity from a Māori perspective in the literature. So this is actually a desperate need and a call for research. So please, won't you join me? Kia ora.
Kia ora, Byron. Thank you so much for sharing your very important mahi and highlighting the challenges in assessment, and actually calling out the assumptions and the untruths around ADHD presentation as well. You highlighted some of the coexisting and intersectional challenges faced by Māori and individuals living with neurodiversity, and the fact that there's still a lot of work to be done there to dispel the negativity. you know, and you did identify a gap in research. Good on you. You've set the challenge. You're calling out for people to follow your lead. But I have to agree with the chat that you've achieved a fantastic return on your survey outreach so far. And I'll be really chuffed to see what the final results of that are. We have got a couple of minutes. I'm just wondering if there might be one or two questions that we might go to. What have we got in chat? Have we got any questions? There's lots of love for you there, Byron. Everybody's congratulating you, thanking you for your presentation. Fabulous presentation, amazing. Such misinformation out there regarding ADHD.
Hey, Andrea, I'm going to put my paper in the chat, then they can just download it because it's a paywall there, and most politicians are too poor to have the access to paywall. So I'll stick it in there.
Thank you so much. I'll pop it into the Padlet too, for the people that have not jumped into Roomrua, so that everybody can get the, the research and the papers that you're dropping in. Has anybody got any more questions or any comments for Byron? We've got 2 minutes before we jump to our next presentation.
Kia ora. Hirawini here from Victoria. Tēnā koe, Byron. May Atlands help you get to your 1,000 people goal. I work with a lot of students. I call it superpowers. And I ask them to name it, own it, kopaki here, embrace it, give their superpower a job to do. Come and help me with the assignment. They can see big picture, struggle to fine tune it. So our group here at Victoria Student Learning Te Taiako, we're all on board with helping our students with their superpowers. So kia ora, Byron, you'll be hearing from us.
Awesome, I can't wait. Let's do it.
Kia ora in a minute. Byron, I hope you're okay for your inbox to blow up in a minute.
Yep, all good. Actually, they can email me for the paper because I can't stick it into the chat because of admin, but I will put the link to the survey in the chat if people want to share it.
Okay, fantastic.